Oh. So leave it right here. Okay. Do I just start or?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the June 15th meeting of APAB. I'm Debbie Skopczynski and president of APAB for 2019. Joining me at the front is Melissa Moore, who is our secretary, and Jim Martin, parliamentarian for APAB. And soon to join us is Ann Phillips, our finance secretary. Also at the table at my far right is Leah LaRue, interim assistant director of neighborhood planning units, and Daniel Vasquez, who is her faithful aide, someone that we depend on. APAB is an official city board and representative body of the 25 NPUs, with each NPU having a single vote. Each NPU chair must formally notify the Department of City Planning and APAB of their official delegate and alternate, and only these delegates or alternates may vote. If you have been selected or elected a delegate and your name was not on the sign-in sheet, it means that we haven't heard from your NPU chair. If you believe that there's an error, please let Leah or Daniel know, or myself know, so that we can follow up and get you on our rolls. We do have an extremely full agenda today, so that we can keep to our 2-hour time frame. I'll be recognizing only delegates and alternates to speak throughout the meeting. Time has been set aside for others to speak during public comment at the end of the agenda. Please keep all questions germane to the topic being addressed and respectful to everyone in the room. Questions for presenters, if we're running out of time, can be asked outside the room if we become tight on time. And I'll be watching the time and may need to cut off discussions, so we may have to pull some of those conversations outside. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium and identify yourself by name and NPU if you are a delegate or alternate. Comments made from the floor will not be picked up by Channel 26. And if you can tell from the monitors, we are being broadcast today. And just as a reminder, the fabulous breakfast that was provided today by the collaborative firm on behalf of the MARTA Renaming Project is outside the door. However, it cannot come inside the room. City Hall requests that we do not bring any food or drink into the room. I don't believe we've got a quorum yet, so I think we're going to hold off on a roll call, which means that we're going to skip to presentations. And the first presentation this morning is the MARTA Transit Renaming Project. Tori Hill is here to speak. Thank you, Tori, and thanks for breakfast.
You are very welcome, and thank you for having us. First, I want to, again, my name is Tori Hill, Director of Marketing and Communications with the collaborative firm, and we are working a project on behalf of MARTA, the Station Renaming Project. And I'd like to recognize Nichelle Wilson, who's also with the Communications Division, and she has, as you see, just moving around the room, trying to make sure that we get out our materials and respond to questions. Don't want to take up too much time on your agenda, but I would like to just jump right on in, and so that we can share what we're here about. MARTA has entered into a phase where, they're looking at a lot of expansion, a lot of improvements, and with that also comes looking at how our stations are recognized. And what they have done is task the collaborative firm with speaking to the community about what your local station is called and how would you suggest, how would you like to work with us at looking at renaming options. Most of you have some ideas as to how MARTA came about and how they got started. Be quite honest with you, I am not from Atlanta, so this project has been very interesting to me. By show of hands, do we have a lot of natives in the room? Not really natives. So I don't feel so bad. I go to a lot of meetings and I'm just like, no, you're not from here. Let me fill you in. So anyway, just know that this project has been very interesting in seeing how MARTA has come about. As you can see from our presentation that some of you have copies of, the discussion about transportation for the Atlanta region goes back as far as the 1950s. Commission released a report and went on after those conversations in the 50s, and a study was completed in looking at how do you move people as far back as the 1950s from point A to point B. A study came out in the 60s. We're seeing it went from the 50s into the 60s, so things still didn't move quite as quickly as sometimes we would like. But the study came out and recommended that there be a 5-county bus and rail system. That was in the 60s. The report prompted a wave of proposals for a revamped transit system that led to the passing of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority Act. That's where that name came from. So many of us just say MARTA. I don't think everyone knows. We know it's transportation, but not its full name. That vision then and that vision today continues to be taking people where they want to go today and tomorrow. What's happened is stations get named for various reasons. A lot of times, memorials to people or intersections or just a variety of reasons. I've shared with you one of the things that one of the stations that was named when the MARTA first opened in 1955. If you look at the intersection of Ashby and Bankhead to the left of your PowerPoint, you look at that same intersection in 2005, even though we call it the Ashby Transit Station, that intersection for which it was named is now Joseph E. Lowry and Donald L. Hollowell Parkway, new street. But our station was named for the geographical location. We have another example. MARTA has not necessarily gotten into the branding industry, but the station that's closest there at one point had Phillips Arena in the name. In fact, it was named I think the full name has the Dome, it has Phillips Arena, it has CNN Center, and I think it's one other because it's 5 different names. There you go, Georgia World Congress Center. So you look at that right now, Phillips Arena is no longer that name of that arena. It was bought and opened now as the State Farm Arena. Again, things changing, making progress, which means MARTA is at a point where they need to look at how do they grow with all of these changes. What changes should they be making? As MARTA prepares for growth and expansion of the existing system, the new improved system must continue to be user-friendly to visitors from around the world. We hear all the time that we know this, we personally have experienced this, that people come to Atlanta from all over, and it is not always easy for those visitors to find their way around the city, not just in cars and their vehicles, but sometimes on the transit system. And MARTA's looking at how do we simplify that or make it clearer for those visitors. So what are we doing today? We're asking for public input through meetings that are being hosted around around the city in various communities where the MARTA transit stations that have been identified to be renamed are. So we're asking community members to help us select the criteria for how a new name should be chosen. Should it be geographical, historical, or even should any of our stations be considered for corporate sponsorship? Community members are also being asked to share their name recommendations. At the conclusion of my presentation, what we're going to be asking you to do is actually write some comments down, write a suggested name. Because what we're looking at is everything will be considered. What we're prepared to do is work with MARTA by taking your information, putting it in just a package saying this, we went to all of these areas around the city, and the feedback is. We're going to prepare this for our MARTA External Affairs Division. They're going to review the proposed name changes against the general policy that's already in place at MARTA and make a recommendation to the board for approval. MARTA board members can request that any station be renamed, and they must approve any final name changes for any of the stations. Revisiting station names. Any names that are recommended or accepted, they're looked at to address both the initial naming of stations and naming of the stations and station renaming. Prioritizing the geographical location, making it more wayfinding, and it must answer to a policy of being simplistic, and it must have community-wide recognition and reflect the community involvement. The general policy at MARTA is that station names will appear repeatedly and throughout the system. The initial station name should be approved when the station is added to the system plan. Revisiting station names. Keep in mind as you make your suggestions that all station names must be reflected on all station and system signage, and they're going to be printed on marketing materials and station announcements. Outside entities requesting station name changes must agree to pay for the full cost or participate in programs promoting the use of MARTA if approved by the board. That gets back to that corporate sponsorship possibility that I mentioned earlier. Just for an example of what's going on around the country and why MARTA is trying to make that move forward, I included in here one area is Los Angeles. As their system is growing, they're looking at making a move from just colors to colors, numbers, and letters. In December 2018, their board actually approved a change to how they label their system. Metro anticipates that with the expansion of their system, the use of color, only color, will force the use of some colors, some shades, which can prove to be a visual and language barriers. You'll see that on this next slide. It's a little difficult to look at right there, but if you have your handout, you'll see two systems that have two shades of blue. You see a red that goes into an orange and then into a pink. You see a gold. You also see two shades of green. Now, what I will tell you from my experience, I actually worked with the Los Angeles Metro for a period of time. That blue line, at one point, they were thinking of the blue line stopped at one area, and then the extension they were going to call Aqua. The red line, where it turns, it's purple. At one point, I think it was even suggested that they take that pink and call it magenta. So as you can see, you start putting all of those shades on a map, that's not real clear. In fact, it's very confusing. And the staff that was working and making these planning recommendations, once they started going to the public and having discussions, they realized that probably wasn't the brightest idea, going into aqua and magenta and going yellows to golds. I mean, you or I looking at a map, I see blue. I'm going to call it blue, but I may end up in the valley instead of Long Beach. So that's probably not the best idea.
So, Tori, what do you need from APAB? How can APAB help you?
Let's keep going. Thank you very much, Debbie. I gave everyone the handout. You can see we just went from the renaming as it relates to colors, and then we have Cleveland and New York as it relates to examples of corporate sponsorship. The one I would like to point out is as the New York one, the third one, skipping over the Cleveland one. Next one, yes, where a London bank purchased the rights to one of their stations that was closest to athletics facility that they were building. And they bought the rights at $200,000 a year for 10 years and redesigned that station and linked it to that center. And it is, next slide, called the Barquet Center. And as you can see, it's a very a beautiful design for the station entrance, and then they actually took over all of the signage and maintenance as it relates to that station for 10 years in New York. Fast forward, the next slide. This is what I need from you today. I need everyone to first and foremost think of what criteria would you use to help MARTA choose the next station name. What we've put on the back wall are sheets, and we call that our dot exercise. Would you choose geographical locations, historical references, and today I've even added renaming based on corporate or organizational sponsorships. We have some green and red dots. Please feel free during the meeting or immediately after to go to those sheets, place your dot. Shouldn't take you but maybe 30 seconds. Then we have comment cards where we ask some very specific questions. Give us a name recommendation. Give us your ideas specifically about renaming a station. For it, against it, yes, it should happen, and this is how I envision you doing that. Yes, I would like to see sponsorships of various stations, maybe sites on specific stations that you would like to see that happening. And then, of course, the open question, just what other suggestions do you have? What have we not covered? Is there a question out there that you feel needs to be responded to as a part of this process? Know that we are hosting at this moment, 4 community meetings. It could turn out to be more, but right now we're hosting, we have meetings scheduled as it relates to the Civic Center station, the Ashby station, the Dome, and Bankhead. And those meetings, we had one on the 12th, we have another one this coming Thursday, and another on the 25th and the 27th. I have included that information in this handout. We have flyers or notices that are available on the tables. I also have here a card. If you think of something that crosses your mind later today or tomorrow, or you'd like somebody to share this information with someone else, created a card that has our email address, martatcf@tcfatl.com. I'll leave these cards for everyone, and you're welcome, like I said, to just share this information. And those emails are going to get back to myself and Nichelle, and we will make sure that all information collected is put in a package to MARTA, and so that the community's ideas, concerns, or praise because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of praise for changing the names of some of these stations, or for the outreach efforts that are going on. And at that moment, I just want to thank you again for having me. And the collaborative firm just really appreciated being able to spend time with you this morning. And please take a sandwich home with you. Okay?
Great.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, we have time for one or two questions.
Good morning. Ann Phillips, chairperson of NPUC. The major cities that you've already studied, those that had the corporate sponsor names, were the corporate sponsors responsible for care and maintenance of the stations, or did the transit system continue to do the maintenance?
As it relates to the Barquet, which I looked at in more detail, they actually paid a stipend to the transit system that included upkeep, but the upkeep was responsible for the labor, the actual planning and labor. Theirs was a financial commitment, and it did site maintenance.
Richard? Mr. Ray.
Thank you for coming and telling us about this. I know Marta's always interested in trying to find money, but I think this is a terrible idea. The whole idea of MARTA in this city, and the nice thing about it is that there's a standard look to it, and it does not distinguish between rich and economically challenged and emerging and old. It's all neutral. The minute you start taking money from rich corporate sponsors who decide they're going to jazz up the station, make it look like an elite place on the system, what you're doing de facto is that you're downgrading all the normal stations to a secondary status, which means that you're downgrading the users of those stations to secondary status in the city. It's not a good thing, not for a public entity like MARTA. Now, if corporate sponsors want to give you money and do something else that does not stigmatize certain parts of the system by elevating other parts of the system aesthetically and in terms of apparent quality and in terms of status of the users, that's a different matter. But I think this is a very bad idea for that reason.
Yeah, Jim Martin, MPUD. You had mentioned, excuse me, you had mentioned having people pay the costs of this name changing, which made me think perhaps that you knew what those costs were, and I was curious to know how much it costs to change the names of MARTA stations and to what extent there is an economy of scale to changing many at once.
I'm sorry, a cost? I didn't mention a cost as it relates to name changing.
Corporate sponsorship? You said they would pick up the cost of changing the name?
I cited other cities, yes, that had done it. And one city specifically that I had a dollar figure for was New York at 10 years at $200,000 a year. MARTA does not have any type of agreement like that in place with anyone. And it's my understanding at this moment, no assessment has been determined as to how much it would cost any particular corporation or organization to change.
Allow me to rephrase. Do you have any idea what it costs to change the name of MARTA station?
Okay. Actually, no, I do not. And that is a question that I can take back. Yes. Okay.
One last question.
Hi, thank you for coming. I always find myself in concert a lot of times with Richard, and I'd like to augment his statement question, and that is, first of all, does it have to be an either-or scenario where it be historical or corporate sponsorship? Can they not both coexist? That's number one. And number two, if a corporate entity were selected, what type of limitations can we put on their ability to make this station into a over-commercial area, and we would also still receive the benefits. And I guess there's a third part also. Would that money benefit the community by which that station is resided?
Actually, that's a very good question, series of questions, and one that I could take back to Marta and actually get concrete answers. So I can't answer all of that for you. I will just like to refer back to the presentation and making sure that there is an understanding that nothing would happen before going back before MARTA's board. So first and foremost, MARTA's board would set the, I guess, criteria, along with their staff, would set the criteria and limitations and final approval. So, but a concrete answer to your questions, I'd have to take that back to MARTA. You.
Paperwork because MARTA's going to say we're not going to have.
Well, that's a reason
We're
for.
having input, but you're just taking the input, not because the board is not going to consider it. But I didn't hear you say MARTA board.
Okay.
Let me just
Yeah,
respond to that.
and-
I think
and I
that's
want
a question
to-
she's unable to answer. I think that'll have to come from a
at
policy.
But at the same time, maybe I wasn't clear, and I want to actually allow Michael Hightower, the managing partner with the collaborative firm, to make comment.
Eric, well, good morning, Michael Hightower, and thanks for having us this morning. Let me just refer, Eric, to your question, sir, to your question earlier. I think, let's be clear. And, sir, I appreciate your comments, but I think the first thing she asked about was ideas. When you said you were against that, we welcome those kinds of comments. We were not presenting a proposal for naming rights. The idea was give us input on what you think. So what you said is perfectly acceptable on that piece of the presentation. The presentation was holistic about ideas. So for that aspect, we welcome that. So let me be very clear. MARTA is not, Mr. Tuma, is not out here, MARTA is not proposing naming rights facilities. They're saying, give us your ideas about these items. So let me be clear on that. So after we get that initial point, then we say, okay, there's overwhelming opposition to naming rights. I was on the board when we named Phillips Arena, on the State Authority and others. So it's not about naming rights. It's about what are your ideas about it? Is it a heck no? Is it a maybe? Then we do further exercise. So let me make sure I'm clear about that, just for the record, sir. So I appreciate that, but flat against it on that aspect, no problem. But the concept, because the dome is no longer the dome, and Phillips Arena is no longer Phillips Arena, and the Civic Center is going to go down. So there are some systemic naming changes that have to take place no matter what. So let's just say, fundamentally, are there philosophical policy suggestions that you guys have that are heck no or heck yes? These are ideas.
And that's what our dots are for, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I want to remind folks, I think Michelle passed out the dots.
Yes.
Did you do that?
We have some.
To go back to the three boards at the back of the room and to make your opinion known.
That's correct. Ideas. Nothing is
Okay.
nothing is about naming rights yet at all.
Oh, okay. Very quickly, Amy, I'm going to cut off
Amy
the
Stout,
conversation.
NPU, and since you seem to be the knowledgeable one, is it just for these 4 stations? Because I see absolutely no reason to rename the Candler Park Edgewood station. I mean, you're not proposing crazy stuff.
Great question.
Yes, the stations that have been identified, the flyers are at the end of this end of the presentation. Civic Center, Ashby, Bankhead, and the Dome.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Make sure we get the dots up, and thank you again for breakfast.
No problem.
Is someone here from MARTA? No, I'm sorry. Is someone here from the Beltline, Atlanta Beltline? Okay, Briante? Okay.
I'm sorry, Debbie. We'll be at the back of the room, and people can come do the dots with us.
Right,
We'll-
and any further conversation on this topic will be out in the hallway. Okay.
Hello, how you doing?
Morning.
Morning. Congratulations on the new role.
Thank you.
So yeah, I guess I'll just dive right in. I'm Briante McCorkle. I am the Beltline Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee Chair. It's always a full Full mouthful. We call it Beltline TADAC, and this board is basically an advisory committee to the Atlanta Beltline. So I am here to report to APAB as one of the many things that we do to help keep the community plugged into some of the decisions, especially around budget, that the Beltline is making. And so we give this annual report out once a year. We did it in May, actually, on the west side with that community. So I'm actually going to be doing it here. I'm not going to go into everything that we went into because at the last one we had a whole meeting to ourselves, and we don't have a whole meeting to ourselves here. So I'll try to get through it. So if you guys have any questions, definitely ask them in the comment section. I'll be glad to expand on anything I might go through pretty quickly. So I want to point out that the Beltline Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee, it was created in 2004 by the Atlanta City Council. Oh, you can skip that slide. That's only relevant to the west side. And you can go to the next. Yeah, this one. Back up. What is that? The one just above it. Okay. So what is TADAC? The Atlanta City Council created the Beltline Tax Allocation District in 2004. As you can see in that map right there, it's a zoning kind of overlay. And so this helps, this basically is the area where the Beltline is collecting money for the project itself. Now, this isn't the only money that funds the Beltline. This is some money that funds the Beltline. It also, quite a bit of it goes to pay off the Beltline's debt service, which I'll talk about later, but you can see the map. So everything that's inside that corridor is subject to the TAD. You can go to the next slide. So in 2006, the Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee was created as a means to engage community members in providing recommendations on the bond proceeds and TAD funds and recommendations on the equity and effectiveness of the Beltline. So what's important here is that the Beltline obviously didn't have all the money up front to build it, so they had to borrow the money. They issued bonds in order to get that money. And again, like I said, the tax allocation district dollars go off to pay that. And there was a lot of community concern at the onset of the project. There's still a lot of community concern about how the Beltline is spending its money. And so this was something that the community pushed for as a way to have input on what they were doing. And so in addition to hard recommendations on budget and dollars, we also make recommendations on the overall equity and effectiveness of the project. So if you've lived in Atlanta for the past, I don't know, 10 years, you know that equity and effectiveness of the Beltline is the hot topic. Okay, so TADAC's full board membership includes at least 42 member appointments and at most 45. In 2018, there were 23 TADAC member appointees. So as you can see, we are not operating at full capacity. So if you're interested, let me know. I am the new chair. I was appointed by one of TADAC's many appointing bodies. APAB is one of them. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to serve. APS, Atlanta Public Schools, Beltline Network, which is another advisory board to the Beltline. City Council, Fulton County, the City Council President, and the Mayor all appoint to this particular board. I think you can hold that question until then, okay? Okay, so TADAC, I showed this to try to explain at the last meeting the relationship with TADAC with the Beltline, because the Beltline, or just anything in Atlanta, is a massive alphabet soup of organizations involved in projects, and so it's kind of helpful to know how they're related. So City Council did create, or did ultimately approve the creation of the TAD. The TADAC basically is a body of City of Atlanta, and we advise the Beltline. Invest Atlanta is also something that was ultimately created by the City of Atlanta, but it's now its own entity. The Invest Atlanta also is over the TAD, helps administer the TAD. And Atlanta Beltline, Inc. was also created by the city, but is now its own entity as well. So those are three separate entities: the City of Atlanta, Invest Atlanta, Atlanta Beltline. And TADAC, even though it's City of Atlanta, it advises Beltline. There's also two other things, the Atlanta Beltline Partnership, which you might have been to some meetings or seen things about, and the Atlanta Beltline Network are both organizations that, or they're more like committees that advise the Beltline. There's also this thing called BAHAB. It's not very much known, but it's the Beltline Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So there's a lot of questions about affordable housing. So this particular committee is full of experts who understand housing policy, real estate, and they advise the Beltline as well. The key word is advise. We can't tell them to do anything, but we can tell them what we think they should do and encourage them to move in that direction. So I just want to say that I'm not responsible for the lack of affordable housing on the Beltline, and neither is BAHAB. All right, so the next one. So TADAC, we are structured as a series of committees. So there's an executive committee, which I sit on. And all of the chairs of our other committees sit on. We basically come up with agendas. It's real exciting. And then we have a development subcommittee. So this is the committee that provides recommendations on the equity and the effectiveness of the Beltline. So this goes a little bit beyond the scope of just making recommendations on the budget and just giving the Beltline some extra assistance in reviewing some of the decisions it's made, some of the impacts it's made, some of the progress on the many plans they have, like the integrated action plan, the strategic action plan, and the economic development plan. So there's lots of plans. And if you're like me, I want to actually make sure those plans are being implemented and ask questions about how those plans came to be. And so we basically roll up our sleeves and do that work for the community so that you all don't have to stare at the PDFs and spreadsheets. So that's what the development subcommittee does. And the finance subcommittee provides recommendations from Atlanta Beltline's annual, we provide recommendations on Atlanta Beltline's annual budget and use of funds. So we basically get a budget presentation from the chief financial officer, who will answer and has answered so many questions for us. What's interesting about this process is, these are all public meetings and not very much of the public shows up. And I know how strongly people feel about this. So if you want to come to Beltline TADAC meetings, you should, especially around the beginning of the year through May. That's when we are doing most of the budget review. And I think it's really insightful to see some of the challenges that the Beltline is presented with, so that when we go to community meetings and we hear about things that they've done, we can sort of understand it more in context. So the Finance Committee does a lot of work, and we get a lot of questions answered, and we make a lot of recommendations based on what we hear as community members to the Beltline. All right, so again, I'm reviewing things that happened in 2018, and when I conclude, or I guess as I go through, I'll tell you what we're working on this year. And so we had 3 goals in the development committee. One was to conduct a deep dive into the 3 action plans I mentioned. We did ultimately review all 3 of those action plans for equity and effectiveness. We produced a report for our review of phase 1 of those plans to the Beltline, which made it all the way up to the executive leadership. So we thought that was really useful. It was really useful for the Beltline as well, to have basically a dashboard on how they were performing. And then our second goal was to increase affordable housing knowledge by improving TADAC connectivity with BAHAB, because again, we're advising the Beltline. Some dollars go to affordable housing. We are not affordable housing experts, so we want to be able to work with the other advisory board so that we can make good recommendations. So BAHAB has come to present to us a number of times, and we are basically having the issue with, like I said, there's up to 45 seats on this committee. There's only 23 people, and maybe half of those 23 people come to the meetings. So it's really difficult for us to get to all the BAHAB meetings. So that's been a big challenge, has been capacity to even attend all those things. I love meetings, y'all. I don't like that many meetings. Okay, I can't go to all the meetings. So that's that. And then, so basically, we decided to focus on encouraging greater participation of TADAC members in general, really reminding members their responsibilities, making it easier for them to get to the meetings, to find the information they need. So that's a big focus this year as well. We're focusing largely on our improving our performance so that we can communicate better with each other and communicate better with you all what we're doing, when we're doing it, when you have the greatest ability to make an impact. All right, and then the third goal of the development subcommittee was to provide recommendations to TADAC on equity and effectiveness based on those plans. So we did come up with 10 major areas that we think are metrics the Beltline needs to focus on. We're going to narrow those metrics down because they're kind of difficult. It's difficult data to get, but we will present them to the Atlanta Beltline this year and continue to analyze the results and keep that updated. And my goal is to make that something the public can interface with and find really easily and put it on social media so that you don't have to come to a meeting and listen to us talk through spreadsheets.
Brianne, can I interrupt you for
yes.
a second? I just want to remind those in the audience that we've been requested no food, eating or drinking inside the rooms. So if you want to eat or drink, you'll have to go out in the hallway. And I think you can probably hear the presentation from out there. That's a City Hall requirement, not APAB's requirement. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so you can skip all of this because I don't want to eat up your time going through everything that we went through in the SIP report. So go to Finance Subcommittee. Okay, great. So in 2018, the Finance Subcommittee reviewed and commented on Atlanta Beltline's fiscal year 2019 draft budget. So just for perspective, that was the budget that we're currently in right now, and that budget ends in July. It's July, right? It's the date. That budget ends in July. So then we'll have next year the FY 2020 budget coming up the tail end of this year. So basically everything we recommended at Atlanta Beltline has been hard at work implementing in this year's budget. So we did respond to the budget. We asked lots of clarifying questions. We gave comments, giving advice on the distribution of those funds. And if I'm not mistaken, that is available on the Beltline's website if you go to the TADAC page and look at past meetings. So develop accessible overview of Beltline project finances. So again, it's a really complicated project. They've got different sources of money coming from all kinds of places. We're talking federal grants. We're talking private foundation money. So we really want to make it easier for us to see the data and make comparisons so we can provide better recommendations. And then using the finance tracking spreadsheet overview for leadership development education for all members to use. So again, not everyone is a finance expert. I did not go to school for finance. I do understand budgets, and this one's a really complicated budget. It's not your standard groceries, paychecks, right? It's very different. So we have this finance tracking spreadsheet that we're using to make it easier for people who are on TADAC to understand everything that's going on. So we're still working on much of that this year. I am going to probably skip the detail in this slide unless anyone's really fascinated by pie charts and numbers. Well, let me see if I can pull it up. It's just kind of hard for me to read up there. All right, if you go to, projected revenue in the 2000s. So this is how much money the TAD was supposed to make. This is what was projected. This is what was projected in fiscal year 2019. As you can see, the biggest chunk of money is supposed to come from bond proceeds. The second biggest chunk of money comes from the TAD. And then there's a number of different sources from federal grants, from Fulton County, from foundations, from real estate, T-SPLOST, which is the tax that we passed in 2016. So there's money coming from various sources, and that's what this shows. So this is a 27 million here is what we were expected in bond proceeds, and 15 million in TAD. All right, you can go to the next slide. Most of the money is used on Beltline projects, which is that red piece of the chart. The other big chunk of money is used, and when I say Beltline projects, I mean trail construction. It's mostly trail construction projects. And then if you look over at the green, that other big chunk of money is debt service. So a lot of money is being spent just paying back money that we've borrowed. You can go to the next slide. And most of the expenses they anticipated in 2019 were on parks and trail construction. And if you've been walking around the Beltline, you can see that they've definitely been spending that money. Lots of construction going on. The Beltline's increasing every day, and cool things to see and do. Another big chunk of that money is the purple slide. That's communications and media relations. Is that right? Or is that real estate asset management? That's real estate asset management. So another big chunk of money is real estate, which gets expensive but is absolutely important for the Beltline. A lot of that was acquisition of the remaining parts of the trail as well. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So I just kind of went through that financial stuff. It's kind of wonky to talk through, but if you want any clarity, I'd be happy to answer it. I don't want you all to think I'm not trying to give you straight answers. All right, so ABI's responses to TADAC's recommendations on the draft budget. Is there a way that you all share this information, maybe in an email or put it on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, I can definitely commit to sending it to you all so it can be shared, so you all can see exactly what we recommended and what the Beltline said in response, because this is a lot of information. So as you can see, they agree with a lot of our recommendations. You can go to the next slide. Some of them, we ask a question that's a little off base, so we don't get a direct answer because our question wasn't exactly the right question. And some things, as you can see, we just don't get the answer we're hoping to get. But generally, most of the things we want to know, they agree with or provide an explanation that helps us understand something better. So you go to the next slide. Next slide. Yep, just all through this. Okay, and so one of the things we also did last year was make recommendations on the More MARTA proposal. As you all know, there's a big pot of money that MARTA received from that 2016 vote to expand the system. A lot of people went and voted for that with the expectation that the full Beltline train was going to get built, even though it was never promised. A lot of people thought that that's what they were voting on. And I've been doing a lot of digging on this because one of my commitments as chair is to really grease the wheels on affordable housing and transit, the two most important things of the Beltline, I think, and to make it a successful project. But there's a lot going on with the More MARTA money and what happened and why the Beltline is not going to get full funding. I feel very confident telling you all today that the Beltline is not going to get full funding out of the money that we currently have available. All right? So we've got to find more funding because it's not going to happen with what we voted on. A lot of that money MARTA is taking and they're going to put it in other parts of the region, which do serve Atlanta, but aren't directly in Atlanta like the Beltline is. So that's just FYI. We are working on that. I hope to have more information and a plan forward for you all the next time I come and speak, which hopefully won't be a whole year from now. I'll try to come back before then. Okay, so the other thing that you all should be aware of is the Beltline Design Review Committee. This is another advisory group of experts. These folks do have to be qualified experts in planning, development, so that particular industry, because what they're doing is they're reviewing all special administrative permits within a half mile of the Atlanta Beltline corridor. A lot of that is TAD area. And so that what they're doing is making sure that any new development that comes into the Beltline is consistent with what the master plans say, what development should look like. So these are the folks who make sure that they don't build giant storage units along the Beltline, right? The Beltline's supposed to be something that community can easily access, and if you're putting problematic things right along it, you really make or ruin the quality of the development. And so there is a group of people who review that. They also check it for affordable housing units. They keep an active toll on what's getting approved through these special administrative permits, and they actually report to TADAC at nearly every development committee meeting, full committee meeting. We usually have an update of some kind. So we do a lot. We're a small group. We are trying to be more effective. We realize a lot of people don't know what we're doing. We're in the weeds, like in this picture, and folks generally just want more information. And so I encourage y'all to come out to a meeting, probably a full committee meeting or a development committee meeting or a finance, just depends what you're interested in. And if you're interested in serving, I'm looking for people who really want to dig in and make Atlanta better, and help the city in lots of ways when it's making big development decisions about the way the city's going to look. And there's not a lot of public input. So I just want people who are as passionate about making sure we're heard in those processes as the folks who are coming to all of the meetings. All right, I'm done. Anybody have any questions for me?
Rianti, are there any members of the TADAC here that you want to introduce?
Yep. Hello.
You have to speak at the podium if you're going to speak.
I'm Marguerite Lane. I just got onto the TADAC. Well, what I've been told is I'm waiting for the municipal clerk to approve something.
That's correct.
So in order to get on, I think I'll talk to you in a few minutes. I've got some ideas maybe about how to increase our membership. And I'd just like to second the comment, what I just heard about affordable housing. That is definitely what I hear when I speak to parents, when I speak to other people in the community. Everybody's very concerned about making sure that teachers and nurses can afford to live in the city. So that's why I joined, is to see to what extent I can advocate for that issue.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Jack Rundler, MPUW. Could you go back to the slide near the beginning about showing the organizations that make appointments to TADAC? There we go. So my question is, given that, if I recall, TADAC has 23 out of 45 members appointed right now, could you mention which of these organizations have been making their appointments like they're supposed to, and which of them have not been doing their job?
So there's a spreadsheet that I will not try to pull up because it's always the technology thing and things get awkward. But what I will say is that we've got appointees. It's not that they're not being appointed. It does take them a while to get through the process. By the time they get through the process, a lot of times they don't really know kind of what the next step is. They never quite get the meetings on their calendar. They don't show up. And then the process to remove them is very, very complicated. because you have to then go to the appointing body and make a case that this person needs to be unappointed. And it's kind of ridiculous. And I'm very frustrated. I don't know if y'all could tell. I'm very frustrated by that process. So we have been actively working with Beltline staff. Nathan Soldat's the community outreach person who works with us to try to navigate this process and see what it's going to take to make it easier to get folks off, because there are lots of appointees. It takes a minute to get through the process, but then they just don't show up. They don't respond to emails because we send emails, And that's the problem. It's not dysfunction from these folks.
Next question, please.
Hi.
You can talk after the meeting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Amy Stout, NPU, and 3 quick questions. Does APAB still have any openings to appoint to this? Is there a PDF of this, and are the meetings posted online somewhere? The dates and times?
Yes, so this, I will send the PDF, so you can share it on social media. I encourage you all to share it. We don't have a Facebook page, so it'd be helpful to get it out. And do you know the question about APAB appointees?
We have 3 that are outstanding that are going through the process. Yeah.
Okay, so 3 that are outstanding going through the process.
So we have two more appointees openings.
And so yes, that I think that if you're, this is one of the bodies I think that is doing a really good job with appointing people when there are openings. And then the last thing is the meetings are posted online. They are posted on the Atlanta Beltline's website on their meeting calendar. There's also a place on the Beltline. Oh yeah, I skipped all those slides because I don't have enough time to go into this. There's also a specific tab for Beltline where you can just see the Beltline meetings only. But for the sake of the whole, the next full Beltline committee meeting will be July 23rd. That is a Tuesday, July 23rd. That is the next one. So, TADAC meeting. They take place within the Atlanta Beltline's office inside the, I keep calling it the Equitable building because it used to say Equitable across the top. But is it the Georgia Zone now? 100 Peachtree, yeah. 100 Peachtree inside that big black building there. Yep. So that the next meeting will be July 23rd. So I encourage you all to come out just to see what we do and to ask questions, bring your ideas.
Terry Ross, NPUT. I've got a couple of questions for you. Number one, the recommendations that come out of the subcommittees for the TADAC, are those then vetted before the entire body, or do they just go directly to the Beltline? Number two, I heard a rumor that the TADAC is now looking to have exclusively or primarily planners appointed to the board. Is that true or untrue? And then, so I can get all of them in here. The number 3 is community engagement. And this is both for MARTA and the Beltline TADAC. Again, we're being asked to come to these meetings, come to additional meetings so that we can give input. Everyone in this room is in some form of leadership. We all have a heavy, hectic schedule of meetings, but yet this morning we've been asked to make plans to attend some more meetings. Genuine community engagement is going to the people. That's genuine, transparent community engagement, and that's more of a comment than a question.
So yeah, I absolutely agree about community engagement. I think it's really important. I don't think that any city government spends near enough money on their community engagement. A lot of it is outsourced, which just is a comment. So there's that. And so that's why it's important, especially for folks in this room as community leaders. I'm sure you all are committed and dedicated because you're here on a Saturday. But try to find other folks who are committed and dedicated, because that's until we have leadership elected and in place in both parts, the sort of the mayor's office and city council, that really values community engagement and they make those budget decisions. We're going to have to rely on volunteers to go everywhere. So I'm with you 100%. The second thing about, what did you say? You said committees. Yes, we do vet it before the full committee. So the finance committee does the deep dive into the recommendations, comes up with a list of questions. We do ask people who aren't on the committee to weigh in as well. and then we take that before the full committee and talk about it. And actually, that's where the chief financial officer comes to the full committee to answer lots of questions. And the community can come, and the community can make public comment there and ask questions as well. So I think it's really, again, important if you're interested that you attend there, but they do get vetted with the full committee. And what was the final question? Remind me just quick. Oh, the planners. So we were looking for an appointee to the design review committee, and in order to serve on that committee, you do need to be a planner or a developer in real estate, someone who understands that field. That is just for the design review committee because of the nature of the work that they do. That is not for the Beltline, and so if it's a rumor, I'm assuming someone probably saw that and then mixed it up that it was like the whole thing. But yeah, you don't have to be an expert to serve on TADAC. I think it's really important that we don't have a bunch of wonky experts. Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Good morning. This body has been involved with the idea of TADAC since its beginning. And we all know that the attendance, as you commented, has tended to taper off over time.
No, it's still on.
One of the questions that we always have is how genuine the commitment of ABI to citizen engagement. I think one of the reasons you might have people tending to bail out on you is because they get there and they wonder whether their voice really means anything. For example, I'm wondering, your presentation, which is quite professional, was it done by you or was it done by ABI? And are you the voice of the TADAC or are you the voice of ABI when you read their slides to us? I think that there's clearly an issue of needing management when you have a citizen participation group there. But the extent to which ABI is actually controlling the process versus the extent to which they're really being responsive to the citizen engagement group is always out there on the table for us. And we've had many, people on TADAC who've come back and reported in frustration about that sort of thing, even at the same time as they try to advocate for important citizen engagement issues around the city. Equity around the loop of the Beltline. And you say you're the chair? I'd like to hear your comments about that subject and whether you feel like you're actually getting heard or whether you're being manipulated and managed by ABI. Thank you.
I love meetings like this. So one is I did put that presentation together. I am a championship presentation maker. I hope you liked it. I actually even took that picture right there because all the pictures I had white art on it, art with white folks in it, and I just wanted to add some more diversity because this is on my side of town. This is the trail that I walk, and it's a West Side Trail, and I actually took a group of people from my church out. They were all older community members, all African American, hadn't ever been on the Beltline. This was 2 years ago. Beltline had been around for a while. There's a lot of people like that. We went on a walk, and they stopped at this one and were just totally in awe at this piece of art. No, it's not. It's not him. It's called Singer. And anyway, I love that. So I did make this presentation, and the chair prior to me, she made it last year. So this is the work that we are doing. We do get some of those graphs and take them from different reports from the Beltline, but we compile the information. So I do feel like this is us presenting to you, not Beltline. And to the question about, are we effective? Is the Beltline listening? I think that's always the question about any civic engagement. We kind of always feel like we're just yelling at the leadership and hoping things will change. I think what matters is the people who are on the committee and how committed they are. A lot of people come to the meetings, and you're right. They're like, this is frustrating. I'm not sure how things work. I'm not sure where my power lies, so I'm just going to stop showing up. I've been in community engagement, public policy, political field for a while, so I show up and I'm like, nothing's clear. All right, roll up the sleeves. You have to claim your power where you have it. And part of that for us is making our meetings more effective, trying to get better at making recommendations so that when we come to the Beltline, we can be confident enough to say, we really feel strongly that you all should do this. And then, again, because we've got all of these people on the committee that are dedicated to, that do have ties to the community, that want to go out and actually present this, like you said, to the community. We want to go to the community. Like, we're trying to build that into what we're doing. We talk about that at every meeting. We make decisions about how we're going to behave from this point forward, because we know TADAC hasn't always been effective. We know the meetings used to be wild, okay? People used to be live at these meetings, I understand. But now it's quieted down. It gives us an opportunity to be honest about who we are, where we are, how we talk to the Beltline. We've been building relationships with Beltline staff. I think they're our best champions with the Beltline leadership right now. So I think it's really just about the folks on the committee and their commitment to making this thing as effective and using their political capital and their skills to make this thing pop,
One last question.
Pernell Thomas, NPUK, and I'm finally here and present. I live near sub-areas 9 and 10 of the Beltline, and part of the issue I have is the use of the Community Leadership Training Institute, and how do you tie into getting people to come through that training institute to better understand what it is that's expected of them, what they can do to make community engagement more effective and efficient. We have too much pulling and dragging on the few people that really want to be involved and who feel that their engagement is just about manipulation.
So could you clarify for me, this Community Engagement Leadership Institute, is this something the Beltline came up with?
No, it's something APAB came up with under my direction. Okay. And we just need to make sure that that institute is doing what it was intended to do, and how we can pull all of these entities into that training process, because sometimes we can get a little bit more clarity about what's expected, what we do, understanding of ourselves as leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an assignment for you to find out.
Yeah, no, exactly. I did not know about that committee. If I can send an email to you as the chair and ask more questions about that and how we can get involved. Either if it makes sense that I come do it as chair. As you can see, I love meetings, so I'm happy to come and to talk about things and teach people what I know about community engagement. I'd be more than happy to share that information with the community. There's like little things that you just pick up from being in the space over time, like how to find out when meetings are, when they're not published or obvious to find. Things like that. So I'd be happy to come, or like I said, if it's more appropriate that a Beltline staff comes, that they'd be happy to come. Their community engagement team, I think, is really trying the best they can with the resources they have, and we as TADAC add more power to what they're trying to do. So I'll reach out. I'll try to get plugged in.
Great. Thank you, Briante. Thank you so much for being here. And just as a reminder, Briante is one of the APAB representatives.
Yes, I am.
So we done good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you so much. We have one last presentation, and we saved the best for last. I want to introduce Leah LaRue. Many of you have already met her because she has been traveling around the city like a dervish. She is here to talk about the new structure for the neighborhood planning units.
Good morning, APAB and everyone that's here in the room. I'm here to discuss that and a few other things as well. My name is Leah LaRue, and I am the Interim Assistant Director for the Neighborhood Planning Units in the Department of City Planning here at the City of Atlanta. I'd like to acknowledge Council President Felicia Moore. Very good to see you this morning, afternoon, morning. And just before I get started, I want to introduce my team, if I may. I've got our amazing program coordinator with us, Daniel Vasquez, and I know you all know him. It's appropriate to celebrate his greatness. Truly could not do this without him. And I'd also like to acknowledge I serve in actually, I serve 3 roles here at the city, but 2 of them are relevant today. I also serve as the program manager for our internship program, and I have 2 of my interns with me, one of whom might be familiar to you because he is an APAB delegate, and that is Donovan Dodds from NPUR. And I also have my intern, Lauren Kirk, with us, who actually helped with our presentation this morning. We have a visiting intern that's not on the NPU team, but I'd acknowledge her as well, Sharita Underwood. She's working with our GIS team. So thank you all for having me. I apologize that I had to miss out on last month's meeting. I came into this role on May 6th, and the following weekend, I believe, or the weekend after that was an APAB meeting, but I had a previously scheduled trip out of town and I couldn't rearrange my schedule. So I'm really sorry that I missed that meeting, especially since I learned later that there were so many questions that arose about the invoice debacle situation, and I'll get to that as well. So as Debbie pointed out, I have been on a bit of an MPU tour. I think I've met a little more than half of the MPU chairs, and I've visited a little more than half of the MPUs at your meetings and other events. I'm really excited about that. I should have also pointed out I'm a member of the Grove Park Neighborhood Association and a member of NPUJ. Very glad to see my vice chair in the room, Kiona Jones-Green, as well. Okay, so one of my goals in this role is to improve community engagement and to increase public participation. We plan to do that by creating or improving our educational platform and giving more information out to the public. We also plan to continue the support to the MPU chairs that has already been taking place, and of course getting the word out about the MPUs. I'm glad to know that glad to report that we have the support of Commissioner Tim Keene and our Deputy Commissioner, who is my boss, Janity Sidafal. And that is part of the reason. I know a lot of you had questions about the move of the MPU team, and I did promise to discuss that today as well, from the Office of Zoning and Development into the Commissioner's office. Part of the reason for that is that, as I've mentioned to those of you that I've seen out in the community, there was no, conspiratorial reason. There was nothing deep about it, really. The simplest way to put it is that we realized that on each agenda, there are voting items that come from 4 different sources, not just the Office of Zoning. Of course, we have voting items from the APD for your liquor, License Review Board for your liquor permits. We also have liquor licenses, We also have voting items that come from the Mayor's Office of Special Events. We have voting items that come from the Office of Zoning and Development, of course, and we have voting items that come from City Council. And so we wanted to be able to centralize this office, this team, so that we could better serve not only the entire department, but the entire city, and so that the commissioner's office, so that we would report directly into the commissioner's office and kind of remove that extra layer that it takes to get commissioner level approvals and involvement. So that really is all there was to it. The timing was really coincidental. When I proposed to our leadership that we consider moving the MPU team into the office of the commissioner, I learned that they had already considered that, and hey, the timing is perfect. We're making this change, so let's do it now. Regarding last month's discussion of invoices, the City of Atlanta's procurement policy must be followed when we pay directly for any goods and services. What that means to us is that if we issue a check to a provider of goods and services, we have to show that we applied the applicable part of the policy. For example, with catering, we have to get at least three quotes and create a PO, a purchasing order, before the event. To work within that requirement, we requested that the affected MPUs and APAB resubmit their invoices, identifying a fiscal agent to act as the grant payee. The reason that some invoices were approved and others weren't is that there was a glitch in our system that prevented the invoices from being properly routed to our business manager. That removed the layer of approval that would have ordinarily caught that issue. And so those that were processed before the glitch was discovered, those were paid out. The only ones that were kind of stopped are those that were processed after the glitch was discovered, and those were required, of course, to comply with policy. All resubmitted invoices have been processed as of today, and most have been paid out. I know a couple of you have reached out to me about specific invoices that have not been paid yet. Those have also been processed, and we're awaiting checks. So if you have a question about a specific invoice, you can see me afterward in the hallway, or you can always call or email me as well. And so now on to our grant program. Oh, let me pull it up here because I can't read that. And I'm not going to read everything that's on the screen. We're just going to kind of talk very quickly about some of the changes that we're proposing to the grant program. And this is a summary of the proposal. I don't expect you to be able to read it because we have each of that on another slide that follows, and we can move on to that next slide, actually. So the first thing that we're going to do, which I think will resolve the majority of the issues, is change the timeline. Presently, the MPU grant program mirrors the fiscal year schedule of the City of Atlanta. However, the MPU leadership, as you guys know, changes out with the calendar year. So towards the end of the year, you all are electing new officers and sometimes electing the same officers. But in the case of those MPUs that elect new officers, what happens currently is that we launched the program, I think, in April or May, and then by the time the invoices are paid out and you're actually carrying out the projects, you could potentially have a new chair in office. So the new chair then has to carry out your vision or your executive board's vision with the funding that they get the following year. So we're trying to address that by proposing that we run the grant program on a calendar year basis in order to make sure that the MPU chair at the time of the application and approval has time to see the project through. So what that means is that in January, we'll actually launch the program, and we'll issue reminders on your agendas, I think starting in December, actually, about the upcoming grant program launch. And then you'll have discussions in your MPU meeting or just throughout your community about what projects to propose. In March, those applications will be due. In April, over the month of the 30 days between March and April, we'll review those proposals. And then in April, the award letters will be extended. We'll begin processing those payments, because once you get the award letters, you'll then submit your invoices. And then in June, what will happen is that we'll do the Grant 101 session and issue the checks all at one time in June. That gives you approximately 6 months, maybe 5 months, to carry out the projects and to pay out those invoices that you intended. And of course, your closeout process will take place in the month of December as well. And you can always close out before then if necessary or if you choose. Regarding public benefit, the current policy says that the current requirement, states that the grant is used to benefit the community. And it also specifies that there cannot be a cost for public use of the grant benefit. In our proposed change, the applicants will not only be asked to illustrate the community benefit of the grant project, but also to illustrate the community support for this project. And I want to point out that there is currently in our application a question about community involvement. We just would like to ramp up the oversight in community involvement and make sure that the community actually knows what the leadership is proposing and is on board with that. And of course, you'd be expected to discuss that at your MPU meetings or community meetings. For documentation of grant expenditures, the current policy states that MPUs that previously submitted grants must submit a financial closeout report for the most recent fiscal year grant program before approval of any future grants. That part of the process is not going to change, but the proposed change is that the MPUs will provide evidence as to the completion of their project. The MPU chairs and project leaders will be required to prepare a packet of documentation that includes all of the receipts, invoices, and documentation of the expenses for the project. That, of course, ensures that the grant project remains transparent and beneficial to the greater public. And for distribution of awards, the current policy is just a little bit unclear about how the distribution is meant to occur. And so our new application packet will outline that a little bit more specifically. We think that with increased vetting of applications and projects occurring on the front end, that whole distribution process will be a little bit easier. And after attending Grants 101, of course, the project managers will receive their checks on that day. So I'm not quite ready for questions, but we're going to leave that slide up because I have one more item to announce, and then we'll take questions. Okay. The Code of Ordinances requires, and this memo that you're being distributed now by Lauren Kirk, the subject of the memo is the Code of Ordinances requirements for applicants for certain licenses, permits, and zoning matters. The Code of Ordinances requires applicants for alcohol licenses and permits for certain special events to appear before the appropriate neighborhood planning unit. However, as part of this requirement, MPUs cannot require applicants to appear before a subcommittee, neighborhood association, or any other body as a prerequisite to having their application considered at the MPU meeting. Where an applicant appears before the NPU as scheduled, an MPU's refusal to hear from the licensee will not result in adverse action by the city in relation to the application. The Code of Ordinances also requires applicants for certain zoning and land use related matters to appear before the appropriate NPU. However, there may be more flexibility for NPUs to establish or recommend preliminary discussions of these matters before a subcommittee, neighborhood association, or other body as a prerequisite to having their application considered at the MPU meeting. We're asking that you please, I know that there will be some concerns about the logistical implications of these requirements, and if you have concerns about the logistics, please jot them down on the index cards that you have. And for those that are not here and you're reporting back to them, just have everyone email those concerns to me. Of course, my email address is LaRue@atlantaga.gov. Lastly, I know you are all probably aware of our guiding document for the City of Atlanta, which is the highly coveted Atlanta City Design Book. These are not available anywhere for sale, which is why they're highly coveted. But they are, these books are a special edition, and we have a copy of the book for each of the APAB delegates and alternates, as well as the MPU chairs. So if you're a chair and you're not on APAB, we have a book for you too. And I just wanted to read the inset here. The Atlanta City Design, Aspiring to the Beloved Community, is a guiding document for the city of Atlanta. Its purpose is to articulate an aspiration for the future city that Atlantans can fall in love with, knowing that if people love their city, they will make better decisions about it. These decisions, then, will be reflected in all the plans, policies, and investments the city makes, allowing Dr. King's concept of the beloved community to guide growth and transform Atlanta into the best possible version of itself. We do have a copy of this book for each of you, the newer edition, which features a foreword from Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. And if you see me after the meeting, I'll make sure that you get your copy. And at this point, I'll take questions. Oh.
How long do I have? My name is Amy Stout, and I represent NPUN. Have you been to NPUN? No. NPUN is a representative board. This undermines everything that we do. We are well aware that we cannot require special event applicants to go to the neighborhood. We encourage them to, and many of them do because they want to be good partners when they have their events. But all of our neighborhoods have individual neighborhood organizations, and all the heavy lifting and evaluation of everything is done at the neighborhood level. And so we do require them to go to the neighborhood for variances, alcohol permits. Are you telling us we can't do that? Because we've had our MPU bylaws have had this structure for at least 20 years, and you've gotten them from us every year, and that's been the system we have, and I know we're not the only ones. So are you telling us that we're not going to be able to do that? Well,
I can appreciate your frustration. My name is Erica Powers, and I'm here with the Law Department. And we represent, my team within the Law Department represents the Department of Planning, and another group within the Law Department, but reporting to the same deputy, represents the police. Let me try to explain why I can't look at you and also look at them. I'm sorry. Let me try to explain what the situation is and why we are giving you 4x6 cards. We are giving you 4x6 cards, and you can write more if you're not limited to one, for the express purpose of saying this doesn't work. But there was a Supreme Court case. I'm having to speak on behalf of people who aren't here, and I haven't read that case, but we can get you the citation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Section 1983, which is a civil rights provision that is post-Reconstruction and that facilitates bringing a lawsuit against the police in particular if someone feels that their civil rights have been violated. 1983 is the provision that when Michael Brown was killed outside St. Louis, his mother was able to bring a lawsuit against the police for killing him. And very often these cases are used to protest really egregious action, lynchings, police violence. It's a post-Reconstruction law from the 1800s. Apparently, I have been told, the United States Supreme Court made a decision within the last 10 or 15 years that applies some of the same restrictions that you have to, the magic language of Section 1983 is, quote, under color of state law. A sheriff in the Deep South allowed the killing of Michael Schwerner and 2 other civil rights workers in the 1960s, quote, under color of state law. Now, apparently the under color of state law requirement has been applied to much more what we would consider mundane actions, such as applying for a liquor license, applying for a porta-potty license for a concert. So my colleagues are saying, please square the corners. Cross the T's, dot the I's, follow the letter of what the NPUs are currently required to do under the code. There is nothing in this requirement that keeps you from going to a city council member and saying, this doesn't work, may we have legislation, please? And the law department serves both the city council and the administration, and one of the things we do is write laws, but we have to be asked to do it.
As I understand, the law is silent on the structure of the NPU. I mean, if we all have different bylaws and different, there's not currently an ordinance that says the NPU must be composed of such and such a way, or act in such and such a way. And since we only make recommendations that aren't necessarily followed by the government, how does this imply?
I have been asked to ask you, and let us say it should be for the time being, until this can be sorted out, to ask you not to require the requester of a liquor license to go to the community. There is nothing in the code, it appears, that says that you can't suggest, but you cannot require. If they don't go, you have to live with it. You still have to have them come before you and say, we want a liquor license, we want a porta-potty license, we're going to have an event in the park, this is what we propose to do, but effective this minute. Okay? But whatever your concerns are, if you can put them in writing, we will get them to the appropriate people. The people who advise the police obviously have a need to make sure that everything in their requirements is met to the letter, and they're taking the position that if it isn't in the requirement, you can't do it. With zoning, we have a very different process. You really are advising. And we encourage as much communication as possible. And we encourage the development of a regulatory program through Leah and through the NPUs to make sure that if someone hasn't come to a meeting of the zoning committee of NPU number whatever it is, I came from the north. You can tell by listening to me. I don't even know what NPU I live in because I have been here too short a period of time. What NPU do I live in? You have to fix that. I know.
Before you
finally
leave,
found
you
out
will.
who my council member was. You got the old lady to lose her train of thought. I'm sorry. Yes, of course. It's ePowers at atlanta.gov. AtlantaGA.gov, you see? But basically, because of the way the requirements go, because we serve in the law department, you should contact Leah and contact me through Leah. Okay? That's what CCs are for. Any further questions about this?
LLARUE at atlantaga.gov, and it's also on all of your NPU agendas, my phone number and email address, LLARUE at atlantag.gov. Thank you, Erica.
Jack, before you start speaking, I just want to point out the time. It's 11:45. And so this is an incredibly important issue, and I think it's important that we take this information back to the NPUs. It does mean that we probably will not get to much more in the published agenda unless the meeting is extended. So if you've got something that you want to consider that's also on the agenda, we need to keep comments really short. And I'm addressing that to everyone that's in line. Okay.
And if I can borrow the mic real quickly before he speaks. If I could, I would echo what Erica said by holding up a card that says they made me do this. I just want to make that clear. They made me do this. They meaning the same lawyers that asked Erica to do this. It wasn't us. They made me do this.
So Jack Rundler, MPUW. I have a question about the grant process that you outlined. Forgive me if I'm off base because I kind of walked in the room in the middle of it, but it sounded like the process is something like you release the checks in like July, and then the fiscal year closes out in December or something like that. So my question is, how do you get a grant for something that happens in the first half of the year?
So if I understand your question clearly, and I think I might, what you'd be doing, so you still have the grant program is still a one-year program. It always has been. That part hasn't changed. What we're doing is changing the payout date so that you still have, or that the applicant, the actual project manager, still has several months to expend those funds as opposed to having to turn it over to someone else. So that's the only change. That's the only difference.
Dronell Thomas, and the hat that I'm wearing today is former president of APAB, before there was a grant program. And part of the concerns that we had at that time, and I'm making a statement, I might ask a question. A part of the problem we had with the grant program is the monitoring and the control element of who would get the grants and making sure that they're expended for the right purpose. That's one question that we had. There was some information that's been, it might not be on the web now, that we said, what do the NPUs do, what do they not? And I think if you can find that information, it will answer some questions. And number two, we've always had some differences across the city about neighborhood involvement versus NPU involvement, and a lot of it has to be the gentleperson's agreement about how we do business in an NPU. We've not required many years ago that they go to the neighborhood because that can potentially be disenfranchising for some of the neighborhoods that may not have the same organization. So as we look at revamping or making the NPU structure applicable, we need to understand, number one, why was it put in place in the first place? And number two, how has it morphed over the years? And who are we now? And how has it changed with the advent of Facebook and emails and technology? And how has that changed the process in which we do things? The other thing is that Atlanta has become one of the most disparate cities in the country. The worst in terms of income and equality. And we're continuing that. And people without income, it was a challenge for me to get here to this meeting this morning. And a lot of people just don't bother to come out to be involved when it's not going to make a difference, when other people don't consider who you are and the quality of your life. And we can't legislate love and consideration. And a part of what we do has to promote love thy neighbor as thyself.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'll throw an amen to the quality of life comments that were just made. Quick comment and question on the memorandum that we're being served essentially from the law department. And I do, Jamie Gentry, MPU E. I actually have been appointed as the representative, and it's pending with our chair. So hopefully I'll be joining you guys here next month. Quick comment on the update from Department of Law. It sounds like there's a lot of talk about the police protections and an approach that has to account for the law. And in MPUE, what we see on a lot of the license and permits applications, specifically alcohol, are a astronomical volume of applications. It's a sheer volume. Just to process the applications is obviously the focus of what this change is about. I would like to speak a little bit more towards what happens after that license is issued, and there are violations, and there are licensees, applicants who have become licensees that also are subject to laws that enforcement is almost non-existent. So while I do appreciate the Department of Law showing up and commenting on the ordinance and the law that must be followed with regard to the MPU process and maybe some of the bylaws within the MPUs, what is severely lacking in this city is enforcement, both on the LRB, which would cover APD and licensed alcohol licensees. And also we have significant zoning violations occurring in this city. Gregory Pace, as the interim director that has been interim for an extended amount of time, it is clear he can't handle the volume of enforcement complaints to the point that he is unresponsive. Adderley, Denning, we've lost a lot of good ones.
We need to stay
There's
on
zero
topic.
enforcement for
Right.
what happens afterwards. So if the Department of Law will be following this, we need enforcement to immediately follow, hopefully with a date maybe possibly as early as tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry Ross, MPUT. I'd like for the Erica from the Department of Law to hear this, and Richard Raw has taken her out in the hallway. And as we know, she may be out there for the duration
Erica,
of the
can you-
afternoon. Okay.
Okay.
Dronell Thomas, NPUK, and I also serve on the LRB. One, I want to openly compliment the officers that run that department because that's a very difficult job. And in most instances, in people applying for their licenses, they do a pretty good, quite a good job in investigating. There's some that might slip through. Now, what happens after and in terms of enforcement, that's been a problem over there where I live, Joseph E. Lowry Boulevard, Northwest. We've had problems all the time when it comes to drug enforcement, especially people speeding down my street, especially. So we all have things that we don't like, and it's up to us, and that's why we're here today, to try to make things better for the whole city equitably.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back in the room. Terry Ross, NPUT. 7 neighborhoods, 9 neighborhood organizations, which are all very robust and active. LRB, or liquor review, or liquor applications, can and do have a great impact upon the community. At NPUT, our understanding of the process is that this is a bottoms-up system, so that the neighborhoods make recommendations to the NPU, which then carries it to the appropriate boards. And that's the way we treat it. We don't make any decisions without input from the impacted community, so that the residents who are directly affected and impacted by these matters have a chance to have their voices heard. So, by requiring the applicants to circumvent the neighborhoods, it in essence circumvents the system.
As I understand it, I may be mistaken. As I understand it, it's not requiring circumvention. It is that you cannot require an applicant to go to the neighborhood. You can ask. You can suggest. You can invite. But you cannot mandate it as a condition of NPU approval. Now, logistically, that may be very different from the theoretical construct I have been asked to describe. That is why your logistical concerns are of paramount importance. Okay?
Well, and actually...
Point of order. Madam Chair, it's obvious we're not going to complete the meeting within the standard time. I would make a motion that we extend the minute by at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes. No, let's go 20 minutes and do it again if we have to.
We never had a roll call, so we don't know if we've got a...
Yeah, we don't even... Yeah.
That's what I get for coming in late. Well,
Right.
point of order.
Okay, so this is how I'd like to handle it. If you are a delegate and are representing an MPU, please raise your hand. I believe we have a quorum, even though we haven't taken a roll call. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had a quorum for a while, we never took a roll call. Given that, there is a motion on the floor. May I have a second? Second. All those in favor of extending the meeting for 20 minutes, which would take us to 12:20, please say, or please raise your hands. That is the majority. All those opposed, and if you're opposed, you can leave. Nothing's holding you here. The motion carries. So. Thank you. Go ahead.
And now, in continuing the conversation, at NPUT, we already understood that because the city ordinance only requires them to appear before the NPU. Our bylaws clearly state that we strongly recommend to all applicants to appear before the impacted community, and it was worded just for that reason. Okay, and we understand that a person planning or wanting to come into our community and do business, it would behoove them to go before the impacted community. That's just good business sense. But in reading this memorandum here, it appears that some of our leverage is being removed on calling on the applicants to do just that.
I'm sorry, please come to the microphone so we can all hear.
That's what I wanted to back.
That is, I wasn't playing hooky. I was talking with one of your constituents. That's precisely why Leah has asked for input. Okay? And the input is not going to go into the circular file. Okay?
Erica, let me. So if I may make one thing really, really clear and respond to Mr. Ross's statement, our department has raised every concern that's been mentioned here. This consumed my day for the last 2 days. This just came across my desk on Thursday. It consumed my entire day. My team will attest to that. All day Thursday and all day Friday. And I'm very well aware because I'm plugged into these MPUs. I stated from the very beginning, and Erica can attest to that as well, this is going to be problematic for these reasons. However, that has to come from you, which is why we've given you the index cards, and we'd like you to write down the logistical implications, not just why you don't like it, but what it actually means for the way your MPU operates. Either write it down or email it to me so that we can raise these concerns. Secondly, this isn't a new rule that the city has implemented. This is written into the code, which means, and I know Erica has already stated this, and I think it's clear to all of you, that means that it can only be corrected by legislation. I, of course, do not have the power or the ability, nor does Erica, to correct any legislation, to rewrite the law or the code of ordinances as it applies to this. The law department has asked us to clarify this for the MPU. That is the sole purpose of that memo. It does not mean that we are lacking in understanding of the problems that it raises. So I just wanted to make that really clear. That's the Supreme Court.
Microphone, Amy, microphone.
The Supreme Court case is one that I don't have the citation for, that has to do with an interpretation of city activities, not in Georgia, but because it's a Supreme Court case, it is the law of the land. So my colleagues in the law department who represent, we all are attached to different departments in the city. My colleagues who represent, among others, the police and the Mayor's Office of Special Events are concerned that these procedures be followed to the letter. Now, when I said for the time being, it is because, as Leah just said, ordinances and the city code can be changed, they can clarify, but if you are seeking clarification in the city code, there is a procedure, and the procedure is that you have that legislation has to be introduced.
Yeah, thank you. As we're talking, this sounds like it sounds like we've got some work to do.
And I just want to ask one question.
Ms. Thomas, you've spoken twice already, so
I know, but this is very important.
It better be.
Well, you don't tell me it better be. It will be. I just need for you to listen. Excuse me, I'll yield to you. I will not be disrespectful.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Just one point of clarification with the law department. So we can continue doing what we're doing, which is recommending to applicants to go see the impact to community because it would behoove them to garner support from that community.
Correct.
But
you have a requirement.
I understood. Thank you very much.
Okay. Response to that. So Erica, she wasn't in the mic, so I'll say that what Erica just said is that, yes, that's correct, but you can't require them. I would also add that another place where this will impact you all is with scheduling their appearances. What we had been doing prior to yesterday, is scheduling them by accommodating the specific MPU's preferred method of processing applications. So, for example, if an applicant is scheduled to appear in MPUT, but we know that MPUT requires them to go to a neighborhood association that doesn't meet for another 3 weeks, we'll schedule them out so that they can appear at the neighborhood association and then appear at the MPU. We can't do that. We have to schedule them at the next available MPU meeting, which could mean that the applicant doesn't actually have time to appear, calendar time, to appear before the appropriate MPU. So that's another place that it impacts you beyond whether or not you can make the recommendation or the suggestion. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's going to be.
I just wanted to say that this has not always been the process, and it has not always been in the city code. The requirement to go to the NPU was put in the code after the 80s or 90s, so that the neighbors will have some input into the process. Now, what's important is that the NPU is the official body to make the recommendation. So it would be important for the neighborhoods to present that information to the NPU, since the NPU is the official body that makes the formal recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut off.
The city of Atlanta provides such a great jazz festival. It's free to get in. I love jazz, so great to hear people that I haven't heard before and some that I know. So it's just a wonderful event.